just a comment that we all support this bill. I support this bill, and with a reminder that it was, in fact, the Registrar of Companies who identified that audit failures contributed in the finance company collapses, and that self-regulation alone was no longer acceptable as it's not working, and that an independent oversight is, in fact, needed. This is a great bill. I look forward to it becoming law. I support this bill. Thank you.
Call Brendan Burns.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to take the opportunity, and as I suppose the tail-end gunner on this important piece of legislation, to affirm the importance that the Labor Party attaches to regulation. I once heard regulation described as the necessary price for a civilised society. I've also heard it described as one man's chains is another man's freedom. And I say that these bills, the Auditor Regulation Bill and the Financial Reporting Bill, will provide financial freedom and security to more New Zealanders than we have seen in the past. And I was pleased that Simon Power was the Minister who brought forward these bills. I shudder to think of the sort of financial regulations we might have seen if a minister like Rodney Hyde, with a well-known distaste for regulation, had been the minister chosen to bring through these pieces of legislation, because we've seen in the past the consequences that are ensued from a complete move away from regulation. I think back to the multi-billion-dollar issue in respect of leaky homes, which was created by a volatile cocktail of deregulation leading to poorer building practices and the ensuing results for many thousands of New Zealanders. These bills are about oversight of those who have a role in auditing financial companies who are players in financial markets, and much smaller than that. And if I think of an example that I'd like to see subject to the sorts of scrutiny that these bills embody, I think of the detestable character Bernard Wimp, who as recently as this week is still crowing about the money he managed to extract from poor and vulnerable consumers of financial products, if you like, who describes this country as being a country which wants to wrap everybody in cotton wool. In other words, what he wanted was the opportunity to rape and pillage the financial savings of poor mum and dad investors, not sophisticated people who presumed when somebody approached them over purchasing shares that person was actually acting in a broad set of interests, not simply the venal self-interests of one Bernard Wimp. I also think about the two people behind Hanover Finance who used to advertise on our state television news program as being Hanover, the name you could trust, when in fact they were taking the mum and dad investors' money and putting it into their highly speculative investments with no accountability, no trail, no proper audit, and that saw thousands of mum and dad investors lose their life savings. And that is why we need regulation as embodied in these two pieces of legislation. So I'm pleased that the Labor Party has supported this legislation through the Parliament to this point. I think it does make absolute sense. And a final point in support from today, and that is we saw the Reserve Bank Governor, Dr Alan Bollard, appear before the Finance and Expenditure Committee in open session, talking about how we were seeing a more resilient position in the financial system, but how it was still subject to volatility and uncertainty. And he particularly noted how the insurance sector, which of course has come under a lot of stress in New Zealand because of the Christchurch earthquakes, that we have seen already one major insurer having to be given some financial reassurance from the government. He's noting that there are new prudential rules around the insurance industry which actually don't come into play, unfortunately, until next year, but he's taking a keen interest in how the insurance industry is governing itself prior to it coming into the new regime that takes effect from next year, noting that while it's overall in a sound and functioning well, that some may fall to the sorts of standards that are expected under the new licence requirements, and that could lead to some industry consolidation and exits. And already we've seen one company, Western Pacific, go under, and I know personally of people who've lost their insurance cover on buildings in Christchurch as a result of that company. It clearly was not subject to the sorts of regulations that these bills are bringing in for another sector of the financial markets. That is why we need these bills. That is why we need regulation. We are not wanting it heavy-handed, but we do need to see people being able in this country to invest with confidence. I support these bills.
Members, this debate has concluded. The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it.
Auditor Regulation Bill, third reading. Financial Reporting Amendment Bill, third reading.
A point of order, Joe Goodhue.
Mr Speaker, given that we've made excellent progress and are very close to the usual time for the House to rise, I seek leave of the House for the House to now rise for the evening.
Leave is sought for that purpose. Is there any objection? There is no objection. The House stands adjourned until 2 p.m. tomorrow.